welcome to Ink Outside the Box. I'm Robin.
And I'm Chaz. Today we're going to be talking about setting, writing about what you know, what you don't know, the research that you'll have to put into it, and using setting and well, how setting is a character in itself. So, yeah, how do you feel about that, Robin?
Well, I think some of the stories that I've written are set in places that I've lived or that I've been. I've also written stories about places that I haven't been but are real. They actually exist. So if I can, I go to visit them so I can feel what is going on around them. I can see, oh, over there is a field, so I can write that in. Behind me is a river, so that can go in there as well. So I know that in your story, your short story that shows up in Cloud Sneeze and In Search of Strawberries it's a real place, but it's set in the future. So how did you manage that?
Well, that's just pure imagination, really. It's the thing is with setting. Um, so I've written several settings recently. One that I know very, very well, which is a stretch of the South Tyne in the town that I grew up in. And it was based on a true experience that happened to me. Um, and so I knew exactly what that setting was. That said, this happened 40 years ago,
Hmm.
over 40 years ago. And rivers change. It's always best to research what's changed. So if I was to set that in today, I would definitely go down to that stretch of river and see if the bit that I'm talking about has been washed away, for
Hmm.
example. In Search of Strawberries was weird because, as you say, that's set in the future and we don't actually know what's going to happen in the future. But what I did for that was I looked into, because it's kind of set around how climate change has affected the world in the early 2100s. I had to look into how climate change might affect that area of the world. So again, I set it in Northern England. I had to go and look at like sort of climate projections for what might have happened in the north of England in the next 90 odd years. And another story I've written recently was it was like a little ghost story, and it was set in, so there's a 18th century poetess who was a friend of Robbie Burns, and she has a house that is now rubble. But I went down there and sat in the rubble of her house so I could see, and you can see it's like got the outline of the two main rooms in the house, and you can
Hmm.
see where the fireplaces were. So I could picture that much better in my head than if I just made up what it would look like.
Hmm.
So for me, research is key to getting a setting right, even if you know the setting, but certainly if you're having to imagine the setting. And I know that
Absolutely.
you've been down to Loch 10 on the Coventry Canal, Robin, where you're setting your novel.
Which is right behind
So
me.
you're there today by the magic of television. Um, so yeah, I'm assuming that gave you much more of a feel for the place. And
It did. It is part. It's actually we're going to go into a little bit more detail about settings and that kind of thing. But this particular piece of the canal, the Atherstone Flight on the Coventry Canal, is almost its own character in the novel that I'm writing. And I knew that I wanted to get there, and I knew that obviously it still existed because this is a historical fiction novel that's set in the kind of mid 20th century. But I wanted to walk on the towpath and I wanted to be where I had set this fictional house on the canal and actually stand there. And it was crazy because I could actually see where the trees were, where I had imagined that they were. And there's a river behind where the setting of the house is, and there's a field across from the place where this fictional house is. There's a field across there that I didn't see when I was looking at the like the satellite images, which is something that we have access to that people years ago didn't have access to. So
Yeah.
that was, I had to make the journey. I had to make an effort to get there. But another story that I wrote called The Dance that is in Cloud Sneezing, that was set in my hometown that I grew up in. And the walk that I took to school to go to do this dance was one that I had walked probably hundreds of times over the years. So I knew almost where every stone was laying,
Yeah.
on the route. So I didn't have to really do so much research for that because those places are still there. All the houses that were there are still there. The only thing that's not there anymore is the high school because it was unfortunately flattened in a tornado several years ago, and they've rebuilt
Wow.
a new school there. But
Mm.
it was obviously set well before that happened. But you do have to take into consideration, like you said, you have to do the research. It doesn't matter what it is, even if it means that you maybe find someone that lives in that area. If it's like, say, in Australia or something, you find somebody that you know that lives there, or somebody that's in a writing group that might be in the area that might be able to give you some details and some information. And there's a plethora of places that you can go online to do
Yeah.
information and find out history. That was one of my favorite things about doing research for the novel that I'm working on now, is that I've learned so much about that area, not just around the canal, but in Coventry and in the towns that surround Coventry. So it was actually a lot of fun. You can very easily go down a rabbit hole when you're doing research.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah, you really can. Honestly, I I've fallen down many rabbit holes. And it's funny how your memory plays tricks on you as well, because when I was writing Five to Find a Body, I was convinced that it was around the time that True Blue was in the charts. But I thought I better just Google that and make sure that it is, and I discovered, oh no, that didn't come out until the following year. So I had to change the song that I'd written into the story to
Wow.
be one that was around in that year. Yeah, it's because I mean, we have so much stored in our
Yeah.
memories, and you can't get every single thing right. So it's
Yeah.
it's always, and a quote as well. I put a quote into a story, or into it was actually into a commentary for a uni assignment. And I thought, I'll just double check I've got that quote right. Oh, I'd got it so wrong. It was unbelievable. So it's always worth just double checking. Even if you remember something well, you might not remember it totally correctly. Good example is if I was to set a story in my hometown, there was a shortcut from the bottom of the town up to close to where I lived through the secondary school. And I got off the bus there the other day and reminded myself again that that is now closed. The
Yeah.
school's changed. The shortcut up through the school is no longer viable. So it's always good to go back to a place and double check it, particularly if you are setting a story there in today and you remember it from 10 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever. So, yeah.
Definitely.
What would you say is a good way to bring a setting to life, Robin? Because you do that very well with the canal. How would you do that?
Well, the first thing that you need to know is exactly what a setting does for a story. One of the things that it does, it creates atmosphere, makes it feel real. And another thing that it can do is it sets limitations for the characters. It also shapes the worldview of a character. Has that character ever traveled out of that setting? Has that character traveled the world and this is like this little tiny place that they've ended up? One of the real easy ways to write settings is to use sensory words. And if you're doing sensory, don't overdo it, obviously. You want to maybe pick one or two, so a sound and a smell, or something that you see, something that you can put your fingers on, that kind of thing. Even if you want to taste something, you pick up, some wild garlic and start chewing on it or something like that. You just want to make sure that you don't overdo the senses. So how do you tackle senses in your writing? Because you were very good at that as well.
Well, I'm a big fan of senses in writing. I mean, smell, we all know that smell is really evocative. If I smell cut grass, I am instantly thrown back 50 years to primary school when the caretaker would be mowing the grass in the summer term, just before we broke up. And music is obviously really evocative. A lot of people have our song. So I'm a big fan of imagery, particularly I think sound and smell, because they're so evocative. But also I think like a mental imagery as well. I mean, you mentioned to me earlier on about Pride and Prejudice
Hmm.
and the settings, like the class settings.
Hmm.
And I think depending on how you've been brought up, so if you've been brought up working class and you walk into a a posh house, you instantly feel, I think, maybe not worthy or not as good as the people that live there.
Readers will sometimes remember the setting just as much as they remember the characters in the story. Like if you're talking about
Absolutely.
like the Shire versus Mordor, or the Overlook Hotel in The Shining, it was its own
Absolutely.
character.
Yeah.
It was almost alive. It's almost a living, breathing thing as well. So I think that
Yeah.
that's another way to really set your character in a place.
It could be a beautiful setting or it could be an awful setting, but either way, they will stick with you as a reader. If I, as a character, was walking through a cemetery on my own at night, every rustle would be, somebody's there, you know what I mean? Maybe not the same if I was with other people, but
Mhm.
the settings really do affect the character just as they would affect you, So if you
Mhm.
think about how you would feel in a specific setting, and then you put that onto the character that's in that setting, or you look at if your character's nothing like you. If your character's a lot braver than I am in the dark at night, my partner, for example, if I had a very brave character, I would think, what would he do in the
Mhm.
cemetery at night? He wouldn't jump at every rustle. He would feel very comfortable in that setting. So, you've got to know your characters, I think, to know how they would react to the setting as well.
Definitely. And we hear a lot about world building, especially when we're in our feedback sessions on on the OU website on a Tuesday night.
Yeah,
We hear a lot of people use the term world building. And I think that there's a difference between world building and setting, because world
yeah,
building is like the whole thing, the bigger picture, the way things are in the world. Whereas
yeah.
the setting is just that little slice that the character and the reader's experiencing at the same time. So
Oh,
even
yeah,
though you have your world building, and you know that there's things outside of that setting that are influencing things that are going on in the setting
yeah.
itself, then you have to make sure that you're not going into too much detail.
I think you need, if you are going to build a huge world, you as the writer, as the sort of god of that world, need to know what's happening everywhere.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
your characters only need to know what's happening where they are. And so focus on that setting when you're writing that setting. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So it basically comes back to like what you yourself right now, what do you know is going on around you? You know that it's daylight, you know that the house is either warm or cold, you know whether you're home or you're out shopping, that kind of thing. You do not know unless you're looking at the news on your phone, which is something that we have now that we didn't have 20 years ago or before, and we don't know that we're going to have moving forward either, is this instantaneous thing that is what's going on in the world. You don't know what's going on even in the next town, much less across the country. You want to make sure that your reader is focused on what is happening right here, right now, and how that affects the story moving forward. So, what if you find that what happens if you find that your setting's lacking something? What do you do in order to fix that?
I would go down the sensory route, I think, and how that setting is affecting my character. Although if it's really, really flat and you don't need it, cut it out.
Hmm.
I'm sure we'll be talking about editing at some point. And sometimes things don't work. We write stuff and we love it when we write it, and then we look back and think, actually, does that work? Is that moving the story forward or whatever?
Hmm.
Although, I think we have to be careful of that because I once wrote a short story for uni. I had to the assignment was to turn it into a adapt it into a screenplay. There was a scene in it that I thought, do you know, that doesn't really move the story on. And I showed it to a friend of mine and she said, ah, that doesn't move the story on, cut that scene. I was like, yeah, I will cut that scene. And then my tutor read it and marked it and said, oh no, I absolutely loved that scene. I really miss it. And and so I think I lost a couple of marks there because I cut out a scene that I didn't think was moving it along. It is really down to you as a writer. You've got to decide whether you love that scene, whether you think that's going to work. If it works for you, keep it in. What do you do, Robin, if you think something's a little bit flat? How do you?
Well, I find that if you add an unexpected detail, a
Oh,
visitor or something that happens, even a bird that flies into the scene, and you talk about the bird, but also you can change the weather. You can change the time of day, you can change the lighting, and sometimes that sets the mood for something that's coming next. It can change, it can actually kind of show that this is a real
yeah.
place that has real things going on in it. Have you ever changed something in a scene like the weather just suddenly just because you got bored?
Don't think I have, but I really like the idea. And I think also you can use it to sort of metaphorically foreshadow something that's
Hmm.
coming as well. If something bad's about to happen and there's a cloud on the horizon, it could be a hint of things to come. Again, you don't want to get too cliched about these things.
It helped to drive the story forward. And you're going to hear us talk about that a lot about moving the
Mm,
story forward because there is no point in telling a story that doesn't move somewhere, that doesn't go somewhere. If you're writing a story and you're not in love with it, stop, put it down.
yeah,
You might want to try a different story. You might want to take it into a different direction. You might just want to let it sleep for a little while. So if you're writing a scene that is not exciting to you or doesn't make you feel something, then you need to change that scene. So change that weather, change that light, add some sensory details to make it feel almost like your reader can reach out and touch it.
I can't even read a book if I start getting bored with it, let alone write one. I have to put
Exactly.
it down and come back to it. And I think I mentioned in a previous video actually that sometimes I find that a book that I couldn't get into to begin with reading turns out to be one of my favorite books of all time later on when I do read
Hmm.
it. But I think, you've got to be in the mood for it. And if as a writer you're not in the mood for what you're writing,
Hmm.
maybe just yeah, put it down. And even if you're not working on anything else like more than one project, which I know you do and I do, but if you're not like that and you're focusing on one project, just try a different chapter. Try saying, all right, I'm really bored with what I'm writing here, but I know that this is going to happen next, so I'll start on that and I'll come back to this when I'm feeling it. I
And that
think
may change as well. But you do have to make sure that what you're writing is something that you really enjoy. And if it becomes work or if it becomes something that you don't enjoy, then there's no point in continuing on. You just need to put that down and start a different project or work on something
yeah.
else for a little while and let it sleep. Because sometimes
Yeah,
that's all it takes. It just takes another day to go back and look at that piece and say, oh, wait. I like the
yeah,
idea of this. And so you just kind of maybe move it in a different direction. And sometimes changing the setting can help with that. If
yeah,
you're in a particular place, like if you're inside the house and all the action is happening in the house, go outside or go to a different house or go shopping. So you can
yeah,
change the setting and you can actually stretch your setting legs a little bit and your descriptions and how the character's feeling and that kind of thing too, because that can actually help move the story forward. I know you're getting sick of hearing me say that. Moving the story forward, but also getting to the point where people are not getting bored as well. You don't want your readers to
yeah,
get bored with where you are. You want to make sure that they're
yeah,
kind of falling in love with that setting too.
yeah, for sure, for sure. And I mean, if you're getting bored, chances are whoever's might get bored as well. So, you know,
That's absolutely
don't,
true. And
yeah,
like a couple of examples about how a setting can make a story pop. Like in Stranger Things, the small town familiarity makes this supernatural stuff feel even stranger than it would be if it was like in a big city.
Mhm.
And also, I know we're going to go back to Pride and Prejudice again, repeating what you said earlier about the estates and the drawing rooms, putting people into it kind of shows the privilege and also creates tension to somebody
Yeah,
who doesn't live that life. And
yeah,
you made a very good point in saying that you go into a stately home or something like that, and you might feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit uneasy because
yeah,
you're like, I don't really belong here.
yeah,
And whether that's true or not true, it that may be the way you feel. And if you can duplicate that in how your character is feeling in this place they don't feel comfortable, or in a place that they feel really comfortable, then you
yeah,
can make that setting pop for you when you're writing.
yeah.
So we are going to continue on with our series of doing different kinds of ideas. We have lots and lots of things planned for you. So the best way to know when a new video comes out, Mondays, 6 p.m. UK time. If you subscribe and hit the little bell icon, that will remind you when we have a new video. And as always, make sure that you put in the comments anything that you want us to cover in future, because we will run out of things to talk about. And we don't want to
We're good at
rehash.
we're good at repeating ourselves though, Robin.
We don't want to rehash. So if you put something down there that we think, hey, yeah, that would be a really good idea, please put it in the comments and we will get to it, I promise, at some point in the future. So just remember, just keep writing and don't give it up. Just keep on writing.
Yeah, good luck.